Hello, welcome. I am very excited. My guest today is Sarah K. Grace. She is a best-selling author, speaker, and sought-after intuitive healer who has appeared on Gaia TV, Hay House Radio, Coast to Coast, NPR, New Living Expo, and more. She bridges the mainstream and holistic worlds while teaching people how to heal their trauma and embrace their own intuitive gifts by providing powerful healing and step-by-step guidance that makes sense in everyday life. Welcome, Sarah.
Hey, Mary. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you so much for being here. Okay, like I said, I've been watching so many of your interviews. Really, you're one of the most fascinating people I've ever come across. I have a lot of questions for you, but I think first, maybe just briefly, and I know you get asked this question a lot, but just to give people a little background, you became this intuitive psychic medium, whatever it's called, when you were quite little, correct?
Yes. So I was raised in the middle of nowhere in South Dakota before the internet, and my gifts came on at the age of 7. Why that's relevant that there was no internet is because I couldn't just Google what was happening to me and like figure it out. But it didn't, there was no one particular trauma. My entire upbringing was pretty traumatic. I know sometimes people's psychic and intuitive abilities begin with a knock to the head. But for me, it wasn't a single event. Just one day I woke up and I could see colors is how it started. I could see auric fields and colors around people. And then it progressed to feeling their feelings, knowing their thoughts, hearing, thoughts, and then going into seeing spirits. And so that began a long odyssey of coming to terms with understanding, accepting, and then finally using the abilities to help people, which I ultimately did as a paramedic in California's busiest 911 systems for 15 years. And, now I help people in the energy work world.
So, trying to get a handle on what you do for people that don't understand. In your book, I wrote it down, the name, The
Journey
Joy.
into Grace, girl.
I gotta find it now in my notes. Where is the name of your book is The Journey? Wait, I just saw it. The Journey into Grace, not
Journey.
the, just Journey into Grace, Tales of a Psychic Paramedic.
Yeah.
I've just begun it. It's fascinating. Highly recommend it. But I think a good way for people to understand what it is you were seeing and doing, if you can explain about with Taylor, that young girl that was in the accident. It's right in the beginning of your book, and I was like, well, that really makes a clear picture. So can you kind of just share that with people?
Absolutely. So my strength is clairvoyance. I'm highly visual and always see different visions and colors. And I, again, can feel and I have strong claircognizance and precognizance as well. So when I would come onto a 911 call, my experience as a paramedic, of course, I'm showing up to like handle business in terms of dealing in protocols and treatments of the physical body. But as a highly sensitive person and a person with psychic abilities, my experience was like Matrix. So everything would expand and slow down for me, and all of the data and information would become available simultaneously. And so I became the paramedic over time who was always there for death. And ultimately, Mary, what I really found out is that there's nothing to fear, and we'll talk more about that, but it's almost like a beautiful orchestration and symphony. So Taylor is the story in the introduction to my book, and she was just a young girl who got T-boned by a big Hummer. It was a 911 call that I ran. And when I got on scene, I was super expanded so I can see and feel all of the sensory detail. And when I got to Taylor's body, she was crumpled up in the car, and I had to assess, triage, and work on her physical body. But I could see that her spirit, she had not been killed instantly. Her spirit was still connected through a spider. It looks like a spider web. It's really thin and kind of translucent, usually coming from the breastbone. And her soul was hanging out kind of at the top of the car in the roof because her body was still inside. Well, when I was down working on her airway and stabilizing her, I began to kind of assess and have a conversation with the soul. And this is what I went on to do countless times, over 15 years. But with her case specifically, there was an angel that came on, or celestial frequency that came on to the 911 call. Typically, celestials look 8 to 10 feet tall, kind of a cobalt silvery blue. I never really saw wings as much as it's just this really pure, calm love sensation. So here I am navigating and dealing with, her body, witnessing her soul, trying to figure out what the heck just happened. And this became my specialty. I became almost like a midwife, right? Into death, because I had the telepathic and clairvoyant ability to see the souls outside of their bodies. And ultimately, Taylor and the angel embraced and disappeared. And that's something that I witnessed countless times. And of course, she had died at that point. And so that's one of like many calls.
So when you say you could see her soul outside of her body, and you've done this many times, does everyone's souls look the same? Do they look like we look as people? Are they different looking? Are they all just lights? How does the soul look?
That's such a good question. Typically, it looks like the person, except you can see through it. That's usually it. But in the instance of, let's say we have a hospice patient. So what I noticed over time was that there's a difference between the person or the soul's experience in a medical death versus a traumatic death. Okay, it's almost like two different energetic protocols happen. In a medical death, people are expected, maybe they've had cancer, they're on hospice, they're dealing with end-stage disease of whatever etiology. And I would notice at their time, we don't, as paramedics, get called in, to resuscitate hospice. It's more like a pronouncement of death type deal. But if I was there in the moments of death, I would actually witness the chakras releasing. And this is cool because it looks like a ribbon unfurling from the base of the spine, and it's very organized. And it would come out the crown of the head, the soul. And to answer your question pointedly, what did that look like? Sometimes if the person was just over it, like they wanted to die a long time ago, it was just kind of almost like this little poof, right? But say somebody had a heart attack and it wasn't fully expected, but it wasn't instant, I would still see the organized unfurling of the chakra channel, and their consciousness, their soul would come out the crown of the head, and it would be almost like a streamer, and that would be a little more light, more color. Usually with them, I would see their deceased loved ones, or if they had any religious archetype belief structure, I would see the family waiting usually in the corner of the ceiling, and watch their little reunion up there. And so that was the experience with medical deaths and how the soul looks.
So would you say to people who are afraid to die, afraid of being alone, afraid of the dark, you saw with Taylor, you saw an angel greeting her. Did you, in other deaths, did you see people who you intuitively knew were people who loved those people who had maybe passed before them that would come and greet them and aid them?
Yeah, pretty much always. I don't know that I ever saw just any empty void space for somebody in transition. And so first, we just got to address the obvious. Like, people are scared. Like, culturally, we're conditioned to like be death adverse and like, not want to think about it and not really want to talk about it. But it's inevitable for all of us. And I really appreciate my hands-on experience and being there, witnessing the death process so often, because it took any and all fear away for me personally. There's nothing to fear in death. It's as natural as birth. It's the completion of a cycle. And yeah, it's a beautiful experience. And that remind me of the second half of your question.
Like,
Wait, I went off on this tangent.
People come and greet for people who are afraid.
Oh, the darkness. Yeah,
them.
like are people, the souls come in as their darkness. I never personally witnessed any sort of dark entities coming to take anybody. I never experienced a void space where the person was just left hanging. I experienced either loved ones or angels on pretty much, if not every single death call that I ran. I did, however, see a lot of dark energy and entity experience on living people, like that are, addicted to drugs or alcohol or in some sort of trauma, whatever. Again, there's nothing to fear in darkness. This is a paradoxical universe. It's dualistic, light and darker, same, different sides of the same coin, if you will. And so the more we understand, vibration and that death is natural, what my biggest takeaway from all of it, Mary, is to live fully now. Like live fully now, because none of us knows when our last day will come. It will come though. And that's okay. It's part of this cycle. So what do you want to do today? That's really what I'm helping people with now.
And so if people said, oh, okay, that sounds great, Sarah. What does it even mean to live fully? How do I do that? How do I even begin?
Girl, like burn the nice candles, use the good cutlery, go take the trip, speak your mind, tell somebody you love them, like take the chance, take the risk. And it's not always a super big thing. Out there in the spiritual world, there's like hashtag best life. And I think that kind of adds an extra pressure to a lot of us that are already exhausted. People are like, dude, I'm just trying to like get by. Like what, I can't like do best life. What is that? And we can just, again, kind of soften into, it's like there is no right or wrong. And ultimately, how do you want to be today? And a lot of times it's just where you are as you are, right? That's really.
I have a theory. I'm not a learned scholar or doctor or anything, but I have a theory that people who fall into addiction are people who actually have a lot of sensitivity within them, always a lot of pain. The addiction is to numb pain. But I feel like sometimes, like, I get it. It's the people that are really well adjusted in this world and have that take no prisoners attitude that I think maybe aren't as healthy as they appear to be. And I think the people who look around and go, this is really hard, this really sucks, there's a lot of hatred here and I find it hard to deal with, so maybe they find an escape to numb the pain, I think maybe are a little more connected. That's just my theory. So I kind of want to just get into this a little bit, because you were not raised in an environment that was like, oh, you have this wonderful gift, let's support that. And I've heard you speak before, kind of not a very, you had an abusive upbringing, right? And that kind of led you into some places as well. Do you want to share a little bit about that, or?
Oh, yeah, I think it's important, because just like anyone, all I wanted to do was be loved and supported and to fit in. And so at 7 years old in the middle of nowhere in South Dakota, all of a sudden seeing colors, I wanted reassurance. And unfortunately, my family construct was so violent and unstable that when I finally said something to one of them, I was shamed and condemned. And that shaming was a pivotal moment for me, because I internalized that there was something wrong with me. And how many of us can relate to this? It might not be psychic for some people, but like fitting in their family in general, it's like, oh my gosh, right? And so wanting that belonging, not having the validation, being shamed for it, was a pivot point that I turned to drugs and alcohol for many years. And ultimately, I took it all the way pretty much as far as you can, had an overdose and a near-death experience where I was given the opportunity and the choice to come back and help a lot of people understand their abilities or to transition. And obviously I chose to come back, and it's now, all of these years later, I understand why that was part of my path and life experience, because the darkness, the violence, the chaos, the drugs, the alcohol, that world that I was in. And then I picked myself up by my bootstraps. And back then, at my pivot point, when I decided to come back in, this is very important because there's a lot of people suffering right now. And it's like, why can't it just be easier? Or how can why won't anybody come help me? Whatever. It's really ultimately, Mary, it boils down to choice, decision, and personal responsibility. When we get to that, like we hit the low point, we can dissolve and just be like, okay, take a breath. But then it's very important to really reassess and lean into the decision to make changes, because ultimately the thing about life that's kind of harsh is that nobody's coming to save us. Nobody's coming to do it for us. We have to ultimately, even if you have outer world support, which I didn't, we still have to figure it out to then make the behavioral choice changes and the day-to-day decision choices in a different way. So shifting that, I was able to heal myself, and ultimately everything that I went through made me a better paramedic. And now it makes me a better psychic surgeon and medical intuitive, because like nothing shocks me, man. I've been there. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, "Oh, dude, I get it." Like, people can tell me anything. I don't even flinch, because I'm like, yeah, like ultimately we're all doing the best we can for the most part. And a lot of people just need that extra validation and reassurance so that they can lean back into life, because sometimes it's just so heavy and you just feel so isolated. But in those moments, we can have these really sweet surrender experiences, where for me, it was like hitting rock bottom after the overdose. And I was like, well, I know that I can't keep doing this. So what am I going to do? And that was my personal process of healing and getting myself all cleaned up.
And the thing is, I talk to so many people that are trying to find a way to navigate this world in a more spiritual way outside of the confines of traditional religion and judgment or anything like that. And I find more and more that most people have had some kind of trauma or traumatic childhoods or life-changing horrific event. And I think it helps us, first of all, judgment's like the one thing. If anybody believes in Jesus, he said that more than anything: don't judge, don't judge, don't judge. And I think it's the thing that we'll do the most, unfortunately. But when you've walked the path, it kind of removes the judgment, and it also inspires other people, because you can say, you can do it because I did it. I know you're in hell now, but I walked through it to the light, and so can you. Do you think that that's part of why we go through these kind of really traumatic things?
100%. Yeah. I mean, ultimately it's what we choose to do with it. And again, we can choose to lean into progress and self-awareness and growth and ultimately finding wisdom, or we can choose to numb out and bypass and, gaslight or scapegoat. Either are available, and not, again, it's not good, bad, right, or wrong. Things just are what they are. But in terms of like healing and evolution and vitality and thriving, the more willing we are to be like, oh man, that sucked. Wouldn't wish that on anybody. What the heck, But what am I going to do about it? Like, how do I want to frame that? What is the wisdom here for me? What's right about this that I'm not seeing? It takes a lot of watching the thoughts consciously, being willing to kind of climb up out of victim mentality, because it's that's kind of a slippery slope, right? And it can be true. Like, I was highly victimized, and I think a lot of people could understand if I would have ended up a drug addict who just died. They like coming from where I came from and be like, oh yeah, that was one choice. And ultimately though, we have other choices as well. It's just how we want to lean into it, if we do.
That makes a lot of sense. And you bring up choice a lot. And I don't know if anyone can ultimately answer this question, but I would love to hear your thoughts. I've been fascinated with near-death experiences since I was a teenager. For whatever reason, I know it, I believe it. They felt like home movies to me. I've never had one myself. But so many people say they got to a point and they were told, that's it, you can't go any further. And they wanted to stay. They were like, we don't want to go, I don't want to go back. And they were told no. And you said in your near-death experience, you were given a choice. And I'm always curious. Like, we can't say, there's been times in my life where I've said, I'm done. Like, I didn't want to actually kill myself, but I was like, is my contract up? Because I can't handle this anymore. But I don't really have control over that, So I'm really curious to hear what your thoughts are on how much choice do we actually have, and how much is, like, you had this since you were 7, and you didn't necessarily like it or want it because it was causing problems in your life, but you didn't really have a choice. It was there. So just curiously, obviously, like I said, nobody has the ultimate answer, but what are your thoughts on how much choice we actually do have in our existence here on this earth?
It's both and, right? It's a lot and a little. So my understanding is that there's much larger energetic contracts, currents, whether it's karmic, ancestral programming, DNA contracting. There's the contracts that we agree to in the lesson plans and curriculum we agree to coming in. That's kind of like something that's set energetically in the grid infrastructure. So I mean, I did everything under the sun to try to make my gifts go away, and they just wouldn't, I mean, there was some substances that made it, numbed it better than others, but I wouldn't recommend that, because it came with such consequence. But where do we have choice? We have tremendous power and choice in our day-to-day thoughts, our day-to-day behaviors, what our perspective and how we hold our viewpoint on reality. Are we willing to assume personal responsibility for all sides of our lives, even the stuff that we went through? Like, because as we pull in our power, then that's where we're anchored, and the energy can stay in the body, and making conscious choice from an empowered place is significant in the way of manifesting more of what you want. So it's both. And my near-death experience was that I was in this really yummy, like fractally golden love bubble thing, and I heard a female voice, which was either a guide or my higher self, probably. I mean, it's all connected, so both. But I did get to a place where she said, okay, if you come any further, you can't go back. And that's when she was like, we get it, it's been hard, but if you choose to go back, you're actually going to help a lot of people with this. And so I was given that choice in that moment. So there's 3 separate instances there. I think the near-death experience is its own. The contracts, the karmic things, that stuff is its own. But in the day-to-day, that's really where it's at in terms of the human experience. How do we want to be in this moment right now? And that's really the ultimate power.
So speaking of that, individual choice, but also the collective choice, we are obviously in unprecedented times. I know people have said that in the past throughout history. I know my mom told me when she was a young mother and all the mothers were standing on the corner, sure that they were going to be bombed, but atomic bomb was going to go off in here. So there's been time, but I think this time there is really a shift going on, and anybody who is any kind of intuitive or anything doesn't seem to disagree with that. And I've heard so many people who are intuitives or psychics or whatever talk about what's in store for humanity for the next, say, 10 years or so. Do you have any thoughts on that? What can you share about that? And how much control do we have over what's going to happen in the next 10 years?
Well, ultimately, it's going to be a lot and a little again. And so my understanding is that this is actually a really exciting time in terms of if we think of the 1,000,000-year cycles, and there's these 1 to 2,000 year cycles of energy that shift between light, dark, masculine, feminine. So we're living through, my understanding is that we're living through kind of the closing of the Piscean era, which is dark masculine, and blooming into, from 2025 to 2035, the age of Aquarius, light feminine. And so we're in kind of the last throes of a really tight squeeze of the old infrastructure, which isn't, again, bad or wrong. We like to, if we don't like it and it's not comfortable or scary, we're like, this is bad, but everything's just energy, man. It is what it is. And this has all been done before, right? It's just these huge timeline cycles that are playing out, but we're in the last crunch here. And then as things begin to shift, my understanding is there's going to continue to be a tremendous amount of destabilization and death. And that's not a bad thing. Again, there's nothing to fear in it. But as the human collective consciousness right now is super, super heavy, and there's so much fear and so much consolidated energy in that as people are opting out and just being like, okay, enough, we're having all kinds of suicides and all kinds of just different natural disaster events and all kinds of atypical med reactions and whatever. So we're seeing collectively more and more people opting out of the body, which will lighten the energetics of the collective consciousness. So it's really, are we going to make the leap in terms of as it is now, well, we're a little heavy. We're a little bogged down for that. So it's really how much does it get lightened? And remember, in death, you guys, it's like taking off a heavy coat and going hanging out and feeling good and just being like, whew, we did that, didn't we? Yeah. Do you want to go back? Just give me a second, right? Like I need a minute. But ultimately, these timeline cycles, my understanding is that the human species has come and gone 5 times already that they have actual, proof of. So again, this is nothing, we're just happen to be living through this particular timeline, this particular sequence of events with AI, and this is just where we're at. So I really think we will make it through. It's just probably going to be pretty messy.
When you say humanity's come and gone 5 times, are you talking about like Lemuria, Atlantis, or something like that? What do you mean when you say that?
So look at Neil deGrasse Tyson on Cosmos, because it's a whole episode where they have like done the chronological order of the human species and the different evolution cycles. So Aztecs and all of these things. They have, now that we've got satellites and they can take images, they found 4 cities the size of London buried under the Amazon rainforest. So this is all happened, right? And so I like to look to science, like when they actually have the data and that type of thing, and then we can all formulate our thoughts. But I think sometimes we as humans, we like to be really self-important. We're like, this is it, we're the best. Like, and it's like, yes, and ultimately, this, it's been around millions of years. And what is all of this but one single vibrational reality in the construct of trillions, right? There's collective consciousness, and the universe is so big that it can't be understood by the mind. Yeah.
So, Sarah, if you don't mind, I'd just like to do a little bit more of your personal story.
Sure.
So you were this kid with these amazing gifts, which was not supported around you. So confusion and pain or whatever you were carrying, you looked to substances to try and ease that pain. And how did you become a paramedic and doing what you're doing now? What was that journey? Can you share that with us?
Yeah, of course. So the near-death experience, hitting rock bottom, making the personal decisions to get cleaned up, left the Midwest, ran around, did a bunch of stuff, and ultimately went to LA. And I went to, so every time an ambulance would go by, my intuition would be like, do that. I just kind of had this knowing, like, you should do that. But I was so scared of it. And I didn't understand at the time that there's a million steps between starting and, running a call as a seasoned medic. But ultimately, it was just more school of hard knocks for me. Like I had to just kind of like figure it out and like machete my way through the forest out there. That's energetically speaking, try to like figure it out on my own. But I ended up going through the UCLA EMT program in LA. And then I started my 911 career in South Central, so Compton, Inglewood. And I was down there for about a year and a half before going up to Northern California and San Jose and Sacramento. So I did 911 for 15 years in California. And it was incredible because what happened, Mary, is I was very much in the closet with my abilities and I didn't want anything to do with it, right? I was like, no, I'm not having it. But what happened on the 911 calls is the energy just started working through me. And it was nothing I was trying to do. And ultimately, I was really quiet and kind of contracted about it, but I started to pay attention to similarities or, unique experiences between death experiences or chaotic or school shootings or buildings collapse or whatever's happening. I could see the energetics happening. So I would start to kind of take notice. And that had me eventually just lean in to be like, okay, what is this? Why am I like this? This is helping people, so how could this be bad like I was told? And that really embarked me on my own personal healing journey beyond getting cleaned up and dealing with the addiction stuff that I did in my early 20s. Then I was like, all right, what is this business? Like I just was not into the psychic world or the spiritual world because like I resonate with really grounded, practical. And I had a lot of fear and skepticism, even though I was like this. I just had a lot of that. It was mainly fear and misunderstanding. But I started with basic meditation and yoga. Then I got trained in Reiki, shamanism, plant medicine, medical intuition, mediumship, energy healing, psychic surgery. And all of these years went by, and I was like, it started to all make sense that there's nothing to fear in this. We can be really grounded and powerful with our gifts. And that's really what I model and what I really help a lot of people understand, because sometimes as sensitives, it's so much stimulus, or we're so emotional that we're dysregulated a lot of the time. And we don't have to be like that. Just because you're really sensitive or have these gifts does not mean that you're at their whim. You can still show up and be very powerful in life. And that's what I represent now.
I heard you tell a story on another interview, and I can't remember the details, but if you could share it, you were somewhere, and I think several people had died, and that you could see their souls, but they were like lost. And you said you put a crystal or something
Yeah,
down.
that was the Paradise Fire in California. So every year California has these gnarly wildfires, and so many people lose their homes or their lives. And in 2018, there was a wildfire in Paradise, California, just outside of Chico. And it came at 6:30 in the morning, and it incinerated 87 people in 2 hours. So it blew through so hot and so fast, people were just waking up. They were just getting going, and they had no idea it was coming. And I responded to that as actually a law enforcement chaplain, which is some work that I did kind of around the COVID time. And we went into kind of the belly of the Paradise experience. And typically on a 911 call, I'd see, caught one, usually one person dead, but yeah, sometimes a few. I had never personally seen, it was probably 18 souls, maybe 20. It was a trailer park that had been incinerated. And so usually on a trauma, because you got to think of it, Mary, the souls are confused. They're like, wait a second, I was just in bed. What's happening? Like, and it doesn't you're in a body and then you're not in the body. I mean, that's trauma. That's how it happens. You're just like, you're driving down the car or down the street and you get hit. That's it. You're out of your body, or you get shot. Boom. That's it. It's over. And so the soul is like, what? So my specialty was coming in and being able to see them clairvoyantly and speak to them telepathically. So in this instance, I went in, and the energy was just insane, because it was so heavy, and that much death that fast has a very specific resonance. And my guides, my intuition on preparing to go as a responder to this area, to this scene, my intuition had me tuck a crystal in my pocket. I didn't know why, but by this stage, I'm like, I just kind of do what I'm told, you know what I'm saying? And I always figure it out when I'm there. And so I walked in, and there was, say, 18 souls just floating here. And intuitively, I was guided to place the crystal. My clairvoyant vision saw a ray of light come out of the top of the crystal, and then all of the souls started to kind of look at it like, oh, wait a second. So it was working on both the triage level to communicate with them. Hey, you guys, you just died in a wildfire. Like, this is what's happening. Because that's what I did on 911 calls, was like, hey, you just died in a car accident. We're going to pull your body out of the car. I'm going to start CPR. We're going to take you to the hospital. This is what's happening. And so the soul could kind of understand, right, on this end, what was going on. And then back in Paradise, I started to see some of them cross, go towards that light. And what is going to the light? What is crossing over? It's kind of just a transition, a shift in consciousness, going from a lower consciousness to a higher consciousness. It's like waking up, really.
A lot of people talk about crystals, especially people that are practicing alternative spirituality. I guess they're not really alternative. They're actually older than religious, most of them. But I find it fascinating. Most people don't understand anything about them, and I'll put myself in that category. But what is the connection between crystals and people? Like, how does that crystal help? Or maybe you don't know either. And do different crystals do different things?
Yes, everything is just vibration, and I'm not like a huge crystal person, but I did use them in my hands-on healing work in my private practice forever. And then in this instance, obviously, I was guided. Some people are really into it and can tell you the meaning and the vibrational, use of every crystal. But my understanding is just everything's vibration, right? And so crystals are resonant and holding a certain vibration that then we can utilize to either put on our body or to hold. And that will help to assimilate our energy for whatever it is that we're navigating. Since the way I look at everything is quantum physics, it's just vibration, it's just vibrating particles. So like, to me, there's no difference between like a table or a crystal, really. It's just that crystals are older, they come from the earth, and they have a very specific, kind of a good packed punch, if you will, and they can be used for a lot of different things.
You spoke about healing from your past traumas and that you feel that that's important in order going forward for people in general, right? It wasn't just for you, but you feel it's important to start. So how did you start that healing process of this trauma that, I mean, we're all pretty much carrying something just simply because of the way we're trained to live on this planet.
Yeah, it's rare that I come across somebody without trauma. Whenever I do, I'm like, man, what's your story? Because so many people are so bogged down. First, we got to just stop whatever we're doing to keep ourselves distracted or running away from or avoiding. And most people in our culture are just taught to go, 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 and push it down or medicate over. And then what happens is the body or the life experience will force you into submission in some way. We'll have a panic attack and go down or get, whatever. And ultimately, those we have to stop and then accept where we are, which is hard. And I'm not into the whole spiritual, like, think positive, everything light and love thing, because it's just not, that's not reality. Our human experience is messy and hard sometimes. And so just kind of like being like, dude, this sucks. Like, I don't like any of this, but accepting that you don't like it and this is where it is, that starts to soften and open the trauma and the heaviness and the darkness from the field. From there, we can look at, what am I willing to do? What am I willing to change? How am I going to navigate this? And this is a real tricky one because it's way easier to put it outside of ourselves. It's that person's fault. They said something that offends me. Like, it's that person's fault. Like, they did this to me when I was 5 or whatever. It's like, dude, we all got that. You know what I'm saying? What are you going to do about it now? It's affecting you right now. So what are you going to do? And that's really the crux. So the more willing we are, again, to come back and just be like, I'm not saying to assume responsibility for a victimizer's behavior. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying to assume responsibility for your experience after that. That's what's up to us. And culturally, we're taught to bypass and to scapegoat and to gaslight. If we do that, we will never be in our power, and it's very hard to heal, period. If we do take those, it's harder, it's more work. It's like, oh God, I want to do it. Okay, fine, I will. When we pull in that power and be like, that happened, what am I going to do? How do I want to move forward? That's where everything opens up. Literally, the world opens up. After you make that decision, which can take years to get to. I mean, it took me, I was in the closet 25 years, and then I did all the drugs. I did all these things. It took me a long time to finally get to the point. Like, I had to essentially die because I'm stubborn, I don't advocate that for you guys. Like, you can make a decision earlier. But then we got to look at, all right, what does my body need? Am I smoking too much? How many pills are you actually taking? What are you actually drinking? What are you actually doing? And be real about it with yourself. That takes courage to really own it and be like, maybe I shouldn't do a handle of whiskey or a handle of vodka every 2 days, looking at that kind of stuff and looking at the body, looking at the mind and like, what are you saying to yourself? And what are the thoughts and the repetitive, and where's the PTSD and where's the victimizing, story? And then the emotions. Are they erratic? Are they suppressed? Like, each individual person will need something different in their healing protocol. And that's what I do now, is work with people, because it's like, everyone's different, but there's all of these beautiful holistic modalities that kind of fit perfectly. Like physical stuff, there's holistic protocols, mental, emotional. Yeah.
Wow. Everything I was so moved by so many things that you said. One is, I feel the same way, and I struggle with it because spirituality is very important to me. Whatever it is, I hate to even label it because I don't know. I just know there's a longing for connection with whatever this divine source is, and I think the overriding um belief is don't talk about anything negative. And for me, that makes me feel like growing up in this huge family with alcoholism and violence, and everyone just pretends everything's fine. And I don't think we should talk about it to just bitch and bitch and bitch about it. That's pointless. But we need to acknowledge what's actually happening, how we got here, and then how can we open up to a more spiritual way of healing and dealing with us. And it also made me remember something that happened several years ago. Because my mother took me to Alateen when I was 12 years old. I have been working on myself for decades. And I remember I was having a really hard time with the forgiveness, and not keeping that, all the things that happened going in my head. And I was in a meditation one day, and I saw my parents kneeling before me, and they were crying, and they were like, we're so sorry, please forgive me. And they were still alive at this point. Um, and I got it. I was like,
There it is.
that's not going to change anything. Even if they say, Mary, I have to be the one that takes responsibility for the healing. I'm not going to take the blame or the shame anymore for what happened, but it's my responsibility. That's just the way it is. It doesn't matter if I think it's fair or whatever. Do I want to continue on with my life and live a happy life, or keep this pity train running, So what you just said was so incredibly helpful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of
Oh,
course. And that's
Um,
that's the PowerPoint right there, that's it, where we come to that moment of realization and acknowledgement within ourselves. And it takes a lot of courage, because we get so enmeshed with the story and the physiologic addiction to the catecholamines, to the hormones, to the cortisol, to the sugar, to the whatever we're doing, right? We get so physiologically addicted to the emotional processing or to the trauma, like, this is who I am because of this. And that's cool. How's it working for you? Is that who you want to be? Okay, so like, it's like all of that, right? And so it takes a lot of courage, because it's like, oh man, who am I if I'm not that? And that's where it gets really into some high level work and high level courage levels, because going into the unknown for humans, whoo, that can be scary stuff, right? And again, it can be infinitely beautiful, right? We just have to be willing to be like, okay, truly, like you did, truly, I'm good, right? Thank you for that. And now let's go live a beautiful life. Yeah.
Yeah. So, one more question about your personal journey, if that's okay. And I might be lying, there might be another one, but this, so you're a paramedic and you're seeing all these amazing things. Did you ever share with your partners or whatever, by the way, what you were seeing and doing, or did you always just keep that to yourself?
They could feel it. And they were like, what are you doing? And I was like, I don't know. Like, I tried to be all closeted forever, because it's all alpha dudes. They're firefighters and SWAT guys. And I didn't want to be the weird girl who sees dead people. I'm trying to like fit in. And so in the EMS with first responders is like the closest arena to anywhere that I've ever fit in. So I didn't want to be the weirdo in that too, but they could feel it. They couldn't see it the way I did, but they could feel what was happening with me and the patients on calls. So towards the end of my career, I was way more open. And what was amazing is so many of them were like, me too. I can feel it too. I know it too. I dream it too. I can and so I was like, I was so scared of being weird. And then I finally say something and they're like, yeah. So it was cool.
You mentioned something also and something else I was watching with you about the percentage of people that actually do have these gifts that you have.
Upwards of 20%, 1.6 billion known of us that are like willing to say it. So we can easily double it for those that are either still closeted or unaware. So think of like 3 billion-ish people on the planet walking around as ultrasensitives right now. There's a spectrum. Most people feel or they know. Not everybody can see or hear or see dead people or channel or whatever, right? There's a spectrum in this world, at least that I've come to understand and kind of witness in working with all these people for as long as I have now. So yeah, it's cool. There's a lot more of us because I thought I was such a lone weirdo, and if I said anything, I'd be like thrown in a loony bin. And now it's like, if somebody would have just been like, girl, there's nothing wrong with you. There's a lot of people like you. This is what you do. This is how you do it. It just would have like shaved so much time off my process. But I had to go through what I had to go through in order to be in the place that I'm in to do that for en masse, like lots of people.
So you're no longer a paramedic?
I'm still licensed. I will always keep my license because it was hard to get. But I do full-time energy work now. So full-time medical intuition and psychic surgery. I'm still very much a paramedic, but now I'm an energetic paramedic. So I triage people's lives and help them. Yeah.
So that would be my next
I
question.
saw it coming.
What does that mean? If I say, oh, I would like to experience what it is you do, how can you help me?
So people show up with whatever they're working with. If they have an intention, a medical issue, I see a ton of people that have been to every specialist with no breakthroughs or actual answers. I see a ton of people that have huge traumas and huge addictions. And so I also see a lot of really sensitive, gifted people that are like, what do I do with this? So it's kind of a full spectrum. So people just come with whatever they got. And then psychic surgery is very similar to Western surgery, except obviously there's no physical cutting. I work on the etheric template and the astral template layers of the auric field, and I'm able to see into the person's body. So I can see the organ systems, I can see the meridians, I can see where you're holding your fear, I can see what the meds you're on are doing to your arteries and to your, like, I can see all of that, right? So from there, we'll do the energy work portion, which is essentially, it's highly technical, but for layman's, it's like being pressure washed and roto-rooted. So most people feel like they lost 1,000 pounds or like they're getting pulled out of the ditch and stabilized. And they feel lighter, more spacious, more like themselves. So we get you back to a baseline, and I will deal with whatever particular anatomy, physiology things need to be handled as well. And then I give people a protocol, like 3 to 6 month curriculum, so you know what the heck to do afterwards. Because energy work is awesome, but ultimately it's up to each individual to assimilate and then create the changes afterwards in the life, right? In their life.
So just to go over before we close, you saying that 20% of the population has these gifts. And I think all of us can kind of go, oh yeah, like I dreamt about my son. I met my son's father one night, was not attracted at all. And then I dreamt about him. So I dreamt my son before he was even born. And I told my sister, it was my sister's friend, I said, I dreamt I had a baby with that guy last night. Like, you think that means something? And then we did end up having a child together. But so I think we all have some little things. So I mean, that's not anything close to what you're describing, but say if I was someone that felt like maybe I do have these gifts, and thank you for saying what you're saying so that people aren't so frightened, because I do believe as this shift in consciousness is happening, more and more people are going to be in touch with all these intuitive abilities that we have. So say I'm just kind of dipping my toe in the water, like what would you suggest? What are like 3 things to do for yourself to help foster these abilities that we have?
So basics are going to be everything in the body. So grounding, right? There's so many people that are energetically sensitive that disassociate because it's too traumatic to be in the body. So in order to be powerful in your gifts, we got to learn to ground and live in the body. So that's exercise, Tai Chi, Qigong, meditation, yoga, acupuncture, rolfing, all kinds, whole bunch of stuff, right? From there, then learn about clearing your energy field. As far as energy anatomy, the main things that you're going to want to know about are the auric field, the chakra channel, and the meridians. The more that you learn about those and like what they are, what they mean, how to clear them, what that means to clear them, then you're going to have more power in your own grid infrastructure, meaning you're just going to know how to drive your apparatus. Okay. So we have the physical, then we've got the energetic, and then from there, learn about the gifts. So do you feel stuff? Well, do you take it in like a sponge? Okay, so you're probably an empath. Do you hear voices, which is so scary because who wants to say that in our culture and get shot up with Haldol, right? Or like put in someplace like, but it's a gift, it's clairaudience. So then we lean into things like, okay, which ear do you hear, right or left? Is it a male or a female's voice? Is it speaking English or a different language? Is it a different tone, or is it like there's a whole thing that goes with it? We just got to like take the fear away and normalize it, right? So if you see stuff, just notice, where does it come in? Is it daytime? Is it nighttime? I don't see clairvoyance with my eyeballs. I see clairvoyance in a screen that's 2 inches off the left side of my forehead. And I've just got all of this data and information on these screens, right? So we just open it up and have a conversation about it. There's a whole world out there. In the spiritual world, I think there's a lot of people that mean well, and there's a lot of spiritual ego out there. So I really advocate you guys always just take little bits of whatever resonates for you and always bring it back to yourself. Always listen to your own intuitive guidance above everything, especially as you embark in your own healing journey.
Okay, before we close, I just want to remind everyone once again about your book, Journey into Grace, Tales of a Psychic Paramedic. You can get it on your website. You can get it on Amazon. I got it on Amazon. And please tell people how they can get in touch with you and learn more about you and your work.
SarahKGrace.com, so SARAH, and then kgrace.com. There's 3 ways to work with me. I have the individual one-on-one sessions. I've got an online community called the Grace Place, which is really fun because we've got a whole bunch of sensitive people from all over the world in there, having conversations like this, sharing tools like this. And then I have all kinds of courses and different books and things like that. So you can find all that information on sarahkgrace.com, as well as all the socials, YouTube and all the things.
Yeah, look her up on YouTube. There's a lot of really fascinating interviews on there. Sarah, thank you so much for being with us. I greatly appreciate you taking the time.
Of course, Mary, thank you so much for having me, and take care, everybody.